Marvel fans, we just got a bunch of new reports from a reliable insider about changes being made to the next few Marvel Studios projects. This includes some really interesting new details about the Thunderbolts and Captain America New World Order, some really interesting things that they're going to do with the Daredevil show, and some clarification on what exactly is going on with the Marvels. Some of it seems really cool, and other things make me want to freak out. Marvel has, of course, been on a little bit of shaky ground with Phase 4 and with Quantumania, and so I'm sure many of you, just like me, are looking at this new information and trying to figure out, hey, is this stuff gonna fix Marvel? Like, are we getting to better stuff? Smash a freaking like on this video and let's begin. So this is all coming from the leaker slash insider known as The Watcher on Twitter and Reddit, and this person actually has a pretty good record of having accurate scoops. And the first thing that this guy is talking about, like the first change that Marvel is making, has to do with the tone of a couple particular projects: Captain America New World Order and the Thunderbolts. Several days ago, he said that there's going to be a tonal shift with these movies and they're going to be much darker in tone. But recently, he clarified this, saying here in a tweet that New World Order and Thunderbolts will be Winter Soldier dark, not Netflix Daredevil dark, since people aren't sure what I mean. They are political thrillers, using the comic book characters as metaphors for real-world circumstances. Red Hulk is a prime example of this. He is an allegory. He also says that New World Order and Thunderbolts touch on some supremacist ideology the way Winter Soldier touched on government surveillance. I've also seen this account talk about how this is going to be a setup likely doubled down on when the mutants finally get into the MCU. And to really hone in on what this actually means for us as Marvel fans, I just want to say that I've heard a lot about how Marvel Studios is making major changes to both New World Order and the Thunderbolts. These are projects that have been in development for some time, but I believe Feige knows he needs these projects to be very good, and I think this signal of a tonal change lines up with really everything else we've heard about the two projects. And I think there are two sides of this story. Number one, just in general, the tonal shift, which I think is going to be very positive for Marvel, because it is just getting a little ridiculous how much comedy and lack of seriousness there have been in many different Marvel projects. I think Quantumania is a great example of this, but Love and Thunder and She-Hulk might be the two best example of this. Like, you've literally got Jane Foster being plucky about having terminal cancer. So I think a seriousness in tone and being more like Winter Soldier would be a welcome change to Marvel projects in general, but there's also this other side to this story about the political allegories, and this is so charged. I mean, we obviously live in a really weird time when it comes to politics and people's feelings about it. Things are crazy. People are really divided. And so I really hope that Marvel is approaching these political allegories with a lot of nuance and care, and not trying to like paint one side of the political spectrum as completely horrible. But we'll get into more of that in the back half of the video when we get into speculation. Now, next up, The Watcher is talking about Daredevil Born Again, saying that it is still grounded and focused on serious themes, but I have heard it's going to be lighter in tone. There's a heavier focus on how Matt Murdock helps the underprivileged in the courtroom. Very episodic. He goes on to say a couple of really interesting things, saying here, I've heard the episodes will focus on different cases and Matt will use Daredevil to help his clients outside of the courtroom. This will spiral into a bigger story throughout the 18-episode run, becoming more serialized as it goes on. He continues by saying, I have also heard that every 6 episodes is a smaller pod of sorts. The only thing I can think to compare it to is season 4 of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. The 3 6-episodes pods will not be released back to back. They will take a break in between each pod for other Disney Plus originals to air. And he also says that Elektra will not be in the show as far as he's heard. Now that's really interesting, and I think the tonal thing again is just such an interesting element. It's something that Marvel fans are going to really care about, especially when it comes to Daredevil. Now, what's really odd here is that Daredevil is widely considered one of the best comic book shows ever created. And the Netflix version of Daredevil is really dark. Like, it goes into some really dark places, and people loved that. And there's this fear that the characters from the Netflix shows, or even just more dark characters in general, coming into a Disney-owned Marvel franchise will be watered down, will be made to be a little bit more accessible. Like, basically, none of us want them to Disneyfy Daredevil or the Punisher. And this is, of course, interesting because we've also heard Vincent D'Onofrio mentioning that it will be different than what they've done before. And it seems that there's a lot of signaling from people behind the scenes that the Daredevil show is going to be much lighter than what you got on Netflix, which maybe is to be expected, but a little bit of a red flag and possibly something that will concern some fans. But I personally think this pod approach and having 6 episode chunks, and basically, I guess, 3 of those that will release throughout the year, is really smart. That's so interesting. We've seen other shows do that. Like, even this new 1,000-year Blood War arc of Bleach is doing different pods. It's coming out in 4 big chunks, and this is so cool because it allows you to get really invested into the show, experience an arc of story, and then take some time away from it so that you then have more hype going into that next pod. Marvel Studios basically just not crushing it when it comes to Disney Plus, and we've been hearing all sorts of things from Kevin Feige about how they might change that. Like, the week that Quantumania came out, he did interviews talking about how they do want to make some changes, that they view some shows as like big movies that take place over many episodes, but there's something to be said for an episodic show, for something that leaves you on a cliffhanger, makes you want to just keep watching more and more. And it seems like Daredevil Born Again is going to be Marvel Studios' first attempt at something big in scale like this. Now, what's really interesting is the Watcher goes on to say he's heard this might be the strategy for Marvel Studios with their shows moving forward. Massive shows that come out in different chunks, allowing for other projects to happen in between those two, but also just bigger scale shows that have a lot more different characters in them. I think this is a very, very good idea. So, like, as opposed to getting Moon Knight, Miss Marvel, and the Hawkeye show, you might just get some big show that involves all of those characters. I think this is a welcome change in direction for Marvel Studios, so I'm kind of excited about it. Now, the Watcher talks about the Echo show, the possibility that it might actually come out this year, but it's way more likely to release in 2024. Not really much more to that, although I have a lot to say about that when we get into the speculation. And the last really big bit of news here all has to do with The Marvels, which of course was recently delayed all the way until November, and a lot of people have been talking about reshoots for that movie. So the Watcher says that The Marvels is going through reshoots and that he heard the 3rd act is being reworked. There were also tonal issues with the film. They may trim some of the goofier stuff down. He goes on to say, I'm also not sure the 3rd act incursion is happening anymore. He says that his sources are telling him that they're focusing on fixing the 3rd act, and it's reminding him a lot of Quantumania. Marvel may be allergic to bittersweet endings now. And he also says that Hulkling is coming, but not going to be in this film. And I think it's worth mentioning here that Grace Randolph has been talking a lot about the Marvels and how concerned she is about the film, the tonal weirdness that they're doing with the movie. And it's very interesting that now we're hearing that they're going to trim a lot of that stuff down. And just so you know, some of the rumors that have been going on behind the scenes about the Marvels, there's been this rumor that there's going to be a musical aspect of the film. Like, there's a planet where everybody on the planet speaks by singing. So there's this weird musical stuff. And I think one of the things that's bothered me the most about what we've heard about the Marvels is that there was this feeling that this movie was going to be very much like She-Hulk, in the sense that it was going to try to trigger people and then try to make fun of people for getting triggered. It's like this weird attitude of trying to go at the trolls, trying to like take on the criticism and the toxicity head on. And personally, I just think that's such a losing strategy. I mean, you could feel how you feel about how the fans react to the work, but then changing the work into this weird meta commentary on people you view as trolls is just a losing strategy in today's social media environment. I absolutely hate that. So if they remove some of the goofier elements and take out that sort of She-Hulk bitterness from the film, I think that would be a very good win, but I'm also bummed that they might be reworking the third act and removing the incursion. Now, if you didn't know, the big rumors for how this movie was going to end was that all of a sudden there was going to be this crazy incursion between the 838 universe and the 616 universe, and a character, Monica Rambeau, was going to be able to stop the incursion, but at the cost of being trapped in the other universe. And Monica Rambeau being trapped in the 838 universe and perhaps being a thread that would come up way later in the Marvel Cinematic Universe multiversal saga was a super cool idea to me. And people had also talked about how absolutely visually epic the incursion was going to look like in the Marvels. And frankly, as a fan that didn't really have a draw to any of these characters, the idea of more multiversal stuff being ironed out and an incursion that leads to other crazy stuff towards Secret Wars, that was a huge part of the draw for me. I'm going to be incredibly disappointed if that does not actually end up in the film. But okay, so like, how do I actually see the changes that are talked about here affecting the quality for Marvel Studios? Like, do I actually think that this stuff is all going to work and get most of the fans back on the same page and incredibly excited for what comes next? Well, let's first talk about New World Order and Thunderbolts. And I think tonally shifting these to being more political thriller type movies and more like Winter Soldier, I mean, that's just plainly great to hear. I think that's a big W, and I think that's something that fans would really appreciate. But the concern becomes the political messaging. Like, are they really trying to wade into the political waters, having the Red Hulk be president and trying to make commentaries about how destructive political power in America is? Like, I think that's a huge mistake. Like, if they really do try to just make that very heavily political in an election year, that's sure to see this country and most of the world be really contentious when it comes to the political discourse, that could absolutely be a disaster for Marvel. Now, the best case scenario on this is they try to show the good and evil of both political ideologies. And what I really mean to say is do the Civil War effect, right? You have Captain America on one side and you have Steve Rogers. And I think the beauty of the Civil War movie is that absolutely it is trying to make a political point about overreach, and it's trying to make a political point about surveillance and surveillance states. But the beauty of the movie is it actually makes an incredible argument for both sides. I went into that movie being hardcore Team Cap, and I looked at the performance from Tony Stark and the way the story was written, and I actually found myself agreeing with a lot of what Tony Stark had to say. And so if they go into this just trying to paint the Red Hulk and all of these American people as really, really bad because they want super soldiers to control the world, I think that will be bad for Marvel. But if they instead show that there are a lot of negative aspects to that, but also there could be some valid reasons as to why America should have super soldiers and be ready to fight like threats from Earth, but also cosmic threats, then I think you might actually have some real magic there. And I know they're throwing so many crazy things into these movies next year, and the good side of this is that if they absolutely nail it, I think it really will feel like Marvel is hitting their stride again. And this is because these movies are really, really connected, and I think really important for what the overall look of the Marvel Cinematic Universe is going to be in the next couple of years before like the Kangs come in and try to destroy us all. Like, I think it's really, really important that both of those movies next year are bangers, are fan favorites, because that will really put things back on track. Now, when it comes to Daredevil, this tonal thing, I mean, I'm just going to be honest, it kind of bothers me. Like, I don't love the idea of them doing a more lighthearted Daredevil. Don't get me wrong. There are runs in the comics where Daredevil is more lighthearted. They've used that character in that way before. But I think especially when you go from the Netflix show into something under Disney and you just put those words out there, like, this is going to be tonally light-hearted. Ooh, like, I just think that's all sorts of red flags, and it will really bother a lot of fans. Hopefully, it is handled in such a way that there's fun, that there's adventure, a great character here, like heroic stuff happening, but also a real dark side to not only Matt, but to crime fighting and just the world of heroes in general. It's a really tough balance to strike, but if they end up nailing it, I think that a lot of fans would embrace the show. They love the Daredevil character, and I think it's also a really smart idea for them to break it up into these three separate pods. Like, that could be the ticket, man. That could just be what Marvel does on Disney Plus moving forward. Like, one or two big shows like that are really spread out, super involved, and have a ton of different Marvel characters in them. Now, when it comes to Echo, this is a really weird one for me, and it's one of the things I'm most concerned about with Marvel over the course of the next couple of years. They are clearly signaling that they want to slow things down. They're clearly signaling that they want more quality over quantity, and yet they already have a ton of stuff in their pipeline that really didn't come from that philosophy. Like Vision Quest, Agatha Coven of Chaos, Wonder Man, and Echo really seem like shows that should be in some way combined together to be more like Daredevil Born Again. But the trouble is they were all created, written, and went into production before Marvel realized that that formula they were working on isn't actually resonating with fans. And I'm really worried that Marvel might just release these shows knowing that they're not going to be as good, knowing that they're not going to resonate with fans in the way they want, but also knowing that they don't want to waste all the money that they spent on production. And I think it's going to leave us in a really weird spot where we're all looking forward to what we feel is the new Marvel, but also having to eat these kind of more middies shows that frankly shouldn't even exist. And oh man, the Marvels. Let's talk about the Marvels. This is potentially going to be a massive MCU L in a year where I really don't think they can afford an L to this degree. As I said before, a lot of the rumors on this movie are very negative. Apparently, this movie has done tons of different rounds of reshooting, and it's already a film about a controversial actress whose movie was really not well received within the fan base. Even Feige knows that movie wasn't as good as it should be, as he didn't even bring back the writers and directors of it. And also the movie's tone and this attitude of like getting in the trolls' faces and trying to come right at the criticism in this snarky way. I just have to believe that that attitude and that way of conceiving a show was done before Feige realized that people really don't like that. I mean, She-Hulk was a show that underperformed and was memed to death. It was really controversial and it didn't need to be that. She-Hulk should have been a show that everybody loved. It should have been a show where people were like, dang dude, this She-Hulk character is kind of awesome. I can't wait to see more of her. And instead it put all these fissures and rifts into the fan base because again, it's a show that tries to trigger people and then make fun of them for being triggered. I absolutely hate that kind of stuff. I think it's really destructive to a fan base. And so what it feels like is the Marvels was going to do that. Apparently, Brie Larson had a lot to do with trying to make the film into that, which again is such a boneheaded idea. But the thing that's really crazy is now they have evidence that that's actually not going to work. So now it seems like they're going in, reworking it, shifting stuff around, trying to remove those elements and salvage this movie. But as we've seen with movies like Quantumania, that shuffle and that change up, it doesn't always end up giving you a quality product. So I think it could be really harmful to Marvel overall if they begin the year with a really controversial movie in Quantumania and then they end the year with another really controversial movie in the Marvels. And let me just say that, like, as a gigantic Marvel fan, I'm not like throwing in the towel, I'm not hitting the panic button, but I'm also trying to call it like I see it. I'm trying to be realistic here. A lot of the stuff coming out next year has me really excited. Of course, Secret Wars, the Kang Dynasty, the fun multiversal stuff, Deadpool 3, a lot of that stuff's freaking awesome. I'm really excited for it. But I do think that we're at a stage with Marvel right now where the quality has just simply not been there. And a movie like Ant-Man coming out and not resonating with fans in the way that we would have hoped, it potentially hurts the next movie. And if you have a bunch of projects in a row that turn fans off, that really aren't as good as the way they remember it to be, it's just going to psychologically affect the willingness for those fans to go out and see all those projects, to be excited about those projects. I mean, look at the way discourse for Marvel has already turned in the past couple of years. And if 2023 is another year full of bad projects, man, it's just really going to hurt the brand of Marvel. It's going to hurt the fan base. And I just hope that they can shuffle this stuff around and fix it. And I feel like they will fix it. But the question is, how much damage will be done to the brand before they actually get a handle on it and fix it? Of course, let me know your thoughts about this in the comment section. You can always come by a live stream as well and just ask me about some things in this video live, and I'll try to answer you in the moment. And if you want to watch more, why not check out this video I recently did about a crazy twist coming in the multiversal saga, which might see Kang versus Doctor Strange, but Kang's the good guy?